Donald Trump's power grab executive order threatens to throw our elections into chaos. Arizona Secretary of State Adrian Fontes is here to discuss. Welcome back to Defending Democracy. I'm Marc Elias. Let's get started. Welcome, Secretary of State Fontes.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so I wanted to get you on as soon as humanly possible, so thank you for making the time, because we just saw the President of the United States put forward an executive order, something that I don't think he has the authority to do. And I think it's, it's outrageous that he is trying to aggregate power that he doesn't have. But it is a massive power grab involving voting. So you are not just the chief elections officer of the state of Arizona. You are a longtime leader, having been the election official in one of the largest voting jurisdictions in the country before you became a statewide leader in this. So tell us, what do you make of this?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. It is a total power grab. It's absolutely unprecedented. And it's sort of like this abject federalization of elections. And the tone, the false accusations that are levied inside of this executive order with no evidence, again, the perpetuation of the big lie and all of that sort of stuff. What I see here, and I'll be perfectly blunt, what I see here in combination with the sort of the lowering of the drawbridge when they chopped us off from having access to CISA and the Department of Homeland Security and those other things that kept our elections safe and secure, is the slow but sure march towards not actually having elections in 2026. I don't think that the president wants to subject himself to a Congress that might not be of his political liking. I think this is, again, another step in that direction, and it's up to all of us to clamor for some clarity. And there's some really weird stuff inside of this thing. If you want to get into some of the details, we're still studying it, but this is a disaster for our democracy.
Okay, you said something that I think people may overlook because they will jump to the conclusion about what this means for the 2026 elections, whether they take place or not. But you said something that I think has been undercovered in the legacy media, and you have been a loud voice on this, and I want you to explain it more, which is that this is not the first thing that Donald Trump has done to target free and fair elections. You mentioned CISA, and you mentioned the Department of Homeland Security, and I feel like I was banging my head against a wall trying to tell people what a big deal it is. So connect the dots here between what he has done already, what he's trying to do here, and how collectively they lead to this, this very grave circumstance.
Sure. Well, let me give you just level set a little bit here. CISA, the Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency, I don't know what it really stands for, but they are really, really important, and they help us. Backstep, half a step, January 2017, Department of Homeland Security says elections administration is critical infrastructure, like air traffic control, dams, important stuff like that. When we got that designation, we were able to draw down resources from the federal government to protect our infrastructure, our networks, our software, sort of our physical security systems that helped keep us safe. And as those threats were ramped up because of the election denialism and Donald Trump's lies, we needed that more and more. And we know that there was interference from foreign actors, and we continue to get banged on by these guys, the Russians, the Chinese, the North Koreans, the Iranians. CISA was a partner in that. They helped us. They would deploy physical security and cybersecurity agents who would literally come out to our counties, survey the equipment, look at the systems, do pen testing. They would do all kinds of stuff to help us secure this thing behind the scenes. Nobody ever really heard or saw from them, and they weren't supposed to, right? These guys would help us facilitate and put on trainings for law enforcement agencies, for county managers, for elections officials. CISA was one of those places where we could find our MSISAC, EISACs. These are information sharing central agencies where we'd had this administration's, where we had the capacity to talk about software problems, talk about network problems that we were having so that everybody could be on the same sheet of music. They were critical to the security of our elections, and they're one of the main reasons why we had great elections in 2024. Let me give you a quick example of how. In Arizona, 2024, on election day, we had at least 15 bomb threats on election day,
right,
all across the state. Right? We had them in small communities, polling places, county offices. And we didn't have almost any disruptions at all. Why? Because CISA helped us prepare. Now, CISA can no longer talk to us because the Trump administration and Secretary Noem have said no. I wrote a letter to the White House. I said, look, you want to rearrange the deck chairs in your alphabet soup of agencies? You have the right to do that. Just don't cut off our services. What's the plan, Mr. President? I wrote a letter to the Secretary of Homeland Security. You're a new secretary. You can make some arrangements, but don't cut off these services for our smallest jurisdictions at the county level across the United States of America. No response from them other than we got your letter. I sent a letter to my congressional delegation in Arizona. This is a critically important first shoe drop, right? This executive order that we're seeing from the other day, that's the second shoe. The first shoe was CISA, and I'm really, really not happy about the fact that people are missing the boat. They've lowered the drawbridge. They're inviting foreign actors to come in and attack our election systems. And now they want to federalize what's left. It's insane what's happening.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. I mean, the no one has been able to articulate an argument for why they did with CISA what they did. Like, I can't even find, and I pay a lot of attention not just to what Democrats say, not just what experts say. I actually pay a fair amount of attention to what Republicans and people I believe are election deniers say, because I think it's important to understand what the arguments are, even though I often don't disagree with them. I can't find anyone who can articulate why you would want to make it easier for these foreign adversaries to attack state and local election infrastructure.
Why would you want foreign actors to have unfettered access to our elections infrastructure? Why would you want to reduce these systems that we set up over years? Mark, we've been working with CISA in many states, blue and red states. Democratic and Republican secretaries of state have utilized these resources for years, and we've seen really, really good results from all kinds of different attacks, whether they're software attacks, spam attacks, denial of service attacks. And it just boggles the mind that no longer are we going to have the capacity to share information, get training from them, have them facilitate our training of our own people. It's just crazy.
I'll be right back with more of my conversation with Secretary Fontes in a moment. But as attacks on free and fair elections grow, so must Democracy Docket. It is dedicated to providing you with the most up-to-date news, information, and analysis of what is happening to democracy in court. Please subscribe to its free newsletters now at the link above or in the show notes below. Yeah, so I want to turn back to the executive order, which is also crazy. I described it in a piece I wrote. It is like performance art. It is like Donald Trump just like riffing in every which direction. I think it's important that people keep in mind that just because Donald Trump says he can do something doesn't mean he has the legal authority to do so. And he does not have the legal authority to tell the state of Arizona or any other state how to run their elections. The fact is the Constitution is very clear. The time, place, and manner of federal elections are set by the states and is subject to override by Congress. It's actually, that's the word used in the Constitution in the relevant portion of Article 1, is that Congress can override it, not that the President of the United States can. So how do you, as the Secretary of State, have to balance, or how do you strike the balance between what he is trying to do with the fact that he doesn't have the authority to do it? He is trying to assert that he can federalize your elections, but as Secretary of State, I mean, I have to imagine your lawyers are telling you he actually doesn't have the authority to require things that he is saying he's going to do.
Yeah, well, that's why it is what you called it off the top. And I said this yesterday. This is a power grab. It is not within his power. The executive has limited powers. We have checks and balances in our system. And I wish the legislative branch would check the executive branch in this abuse of power. And you're absolutely right. Article 1, Section 4, I think it's the second paragraph, speaks directly to the notion that, this is a primarily a state responsibility, but Congress can do a variety of things. And it's part and parcel of the way authoritarians end up taking power. They eke into it. They take a little here. They take a little there. They do it very quickly across broad areas so that they don't get a whole bunch of pushback because everybody's running willy-nilly all over the place, whether it's on USAID over here or Medicare tax over there or elections over here. And there can't be a unified attack against these singular policies because it's all over the place. This one is really insidious and critical, though, because without elections working the way that they have, which is quite well, thank you very much, for quite a few years, what's going to happen in 2026 when that next phase of power moving happens? He doesn't want us as Americans to have choices in who we pick as people in power. He wants to decide. And that's so dangerous. And it is so anti-American. And so I don't think he believes that he has the power I don't know what he believes. But at the end of the day, he doesn't have this power. He doesn't have this authority. And we are absolutely working with our lawyers to make sure, and particularly Attorney General Chris Mays here in Arizona, to make sure we're ready to respond.
So I want to ask you about the situation in Arizona specifically, because it strikes me that this will have different negative consequences in different places. In some places, it'll have negative consequences because it will directly affect their election procedures. In some places, it'll have negative consequences because frankly, Republican officials will use it as an excuse to crack down on voting in ways that are harmful to their electorate. Arizona has been a bit of a troubling situation in that there is such a strong right-wing election denier movement. Conspiracists, people who seem to have made a career almost of making up lies and spreading misinformation about Arizona elections. And it strikes me this is also going to make your job harder in that regard, because this is like feeding that movement. And I saw how many quotes came out of election deniers praising this executive order that it feels like, if I'm in your shoes, it's like a no-win. On the one hand, if this executive order goes into effect or has teeth, it winds up crippling elections and is a power grab by Donald Trump. If it doesn't, because it's wildly unconstitutional, then the very people who are spreading lies and misinformation against you and your staff and the work you do, they can say, you see, it's the deep state. The deep state stopped us from being able to have clean elections. I'm just curious if I'm reading the situation right and what you do about that.
Yeah, well, you are reading the situation right. This doesn't put us, however, in a complete catch-22 because I believe we still have plenty of folks in the judiciary who have not bent at the knee. I still think that we have plenty of attorneys general. And look, more than any of that, I think we still have the American public who are more quickly than ever waking up to the idea that this administration particularly is on a collision course with autocracy. The rising fascism that appears to be emerging out of this administration is horrifying. And look, I know a lot of Republicans, and we hear this all the time. Behind the scenes, they don't agree, but they're not willing to stand up. Well, it's time for these cowards to stand up. It's time for the cowards in Congress on the Republican side to stand up. There are plenty of level-headed Republicans in local and state government who do not buy into this. And there's plenty of crazies too. And we got more than our fair share in Arizona.
Yes,
as you know, we put the AZ in crazy. But when it comes down to it, what can we do? We can stay stalwart. We can stay smart. We can fight like hell. And we can make sure to preserve and protect our democracy at every turn. And really bringing this to people's awareness, how bad this is important. But let me just narrow this down as to Arizona a little bit. Mark, as you know well, Arizona has a very unique system in that we have bifurcated balloting and bifurcated voter registration rolls. There is a federal rule that says that your attestation under penalty of perjury is enough for citizenship. We've been doing that for a long time, but we had a case out of the Supreme Court, I can't remember the name of the case, that tells us that Arizona can prevent voters from voting in state and local races for initiatives and things of this nature if they haven't provided documented proof of citizenship. So we've been struggling with this DPOC thing for a long time. A lot of our voters are have already given documented proof of citizenship. We're dealing with some database issues that we have at the Motor Vehicle Division right now and fettering that out. So a lot of what is kind of emerging out of this executive order is some SAVE Act stuff. that I
Right.
think the administration realized would not get past Mitch McConnell in the Senate. And they are seeing the SAVE Act not really get implemented, and so they want to shove it down everybody's throat at the state level. And this is really problematic because look, what state officials are going to capitulate? Which ones are going to start shifting their systems? And by the way, there's no money behind any of this. They're talking about
This is an
massive
unfunded. It's unfunded.
super unfunded mandate. But here's the other thing too. When he's telling the EAC that they've got to force the VVSG 2.0 down everybody's throats, I'm sorry, alphabet soup. Let me back up. The Elections Assistance Commission has been ordered under this executive order to promulgate and promote and push the voluntary voter support guidelines. This is the technical guidelines that drive the technology behind ballot tabulators and some of the other stuff, right? So they're saying if you don't have equipment that's compliant with these guidelines, now making them essentially mandatory, not voluntary, and voluntary is in the title, you don't get the federal funding. And it's just really creating, as they do, all kinds of chaos in the election administration world. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff. Look, this thing's got 9 substantive sections in it.
Yeah.
And we've only talked about what, 1 or 2 of them right now. This is going to be a rough ride.
Look, Donald Trump has said, he has said it over and over again to anyone who's listening, that he believes election day should be one day. No early vote, no voting by mail, that it should have to be in person. No vote by mail, no, just in-person voting. That registration has to be in person, not online. That there should only be paper ballots. Like, he has repeated this over and over and over again. And
Mark,
I know
eligible to vote. I mean, he's got 34 felony convictions. Is he eligible to vote?
He claims, the state of Florida has a law that prohibits people with felony convictions from voting under many circumstances. He is. Somehow the governor came up with an interpretation that said because it was a conviction in New York, it somehow didn't apply. I honestly didn't fully track how that worked. But I got to ask you this serious question, though, because you're not what is a traditional vote by mail state, right? In that you're not Washington, you're not Oregon, where it's or Colorado. But people don't realize in Arizona, an overwhelming majority of the voters vote by mail. It is incredibly convenient and is incredibly popular. And by the way, just to put in a small plug, when you ran Maricopa County, you did a lot of things to improve the practical ways that people could vote, right? You tackled a lot of the challenges that were the practical problems that people faced. And when you see the president talk about doing away with voting by mail, when you hear him, we talk about shoes to drop. Let's not forget what he's trying to do with the Postal Service, right? Like, do you worry that what it would look like if he is able to cripple or undo the ability of people to vote by mail?
Look, Arizona probably wouldn't be able to afford to support it.
Really?
In 2020, 92% of the ballots came in by mail, and I think in 2024 we were somewhere in the high 80s. I want to say 86 to 87%. It's very, very popular in Arizona, and it's not mandatory; it's voluntary, right? And so that means that well over 3/4 of our voters, in fact, 4/5 of our voters plus almost 9/10 vote by mail because they want to. It's convenient. And it's a super unpopular position that the president has taken. It's a super unpopular position because I can tell you right now, not even some of the whack jobs in our legislature think that that's ever going to be a real thing. When the governor vetoed a bill, I think it was last year, it might have been the year before, that one didn't get referred to the ballot because they knew it was going to get crushed, reducing ballot by mail voting. So it's super popular where it happens. And that's where the popular voice matters. I mean, look, I want to make sure everybody watching this understands this isn't just 2 people talking here. We don't have some kind of magic sauce going on. This is America. This is a democratic republic. We have you to depend on. We have you and your voices that back us up. And I can tell you right here in Arizona, ballot by mail is never going to go away. I don't care what the president says. I don't care what Wendy Rogers or Mark Fincham say. It ain't going away because their voters love it.
So you're saying it's popular even among Republican voters?
They invented it. Are you kidding me? The Republicans in Arizona created ballot by mail voting in Arizona. It's super popular. It's the way that they held on to majorities for a really long time. This look, you don't get 87% of the voters in
Right.
Arizona voting by mail, and it's only Democrats. Shit, we don't have those kind of numbers here. Are you kidding me? This is a Republican idea, Republican backed, and Republican voters love it. Think about all the grandma and grandpas in Sun City and Sun City West. Think about all of our veterans, disabled or otherwise. Think about all of the folks that we have out in rural Arizona. You know, and the other thing that I think that's important is people don't realize the infrastructure required to vote on election day. Now, in some of the jurisdictions back east where it's not that big of a deal, folks already have been, ramping up their infrastructure. They've got whatever tabulators, what other machinery. They've got the little the voting booths and all that stuff. We don't have enough stuff of that. Like we just don't have that stuff to do that because all of our voters are voting by mail, right? So it's insane to me
Yes,
that
I
people
just
would
have
take
to
some of
ask
this
you
serious.
just to illustrate this. I know you were in charge for many years of the elections in Maricopa County, which is the
Yes.
largest county for people who don't know. If Maricopa County had to move to an all in-person voting system, are you saying even a county as wealthy as Maricopa doesn't have the voting equipment?
Well, no, we don't. Assume for a moment that you would have to go back to something like a precinct-based voting
Right, sure.
system,
Yeah,
and they're
right,
like no vote centers. You got to vote in
right,
your precinct.
correct. Yep.
Okay, you know how many voters are in Maricopa County? It's like 2.5 million. Okay, you know how many vote centers they deploy right now in a general election? You're talking about a couple hundred. All right. Now, if you don't have vote centers, you're talking about something in the neighborhood of over, I think right now, and they re-precinct every couple of years, but I think Maricopa County's got something close to 1,000 precincts. Now, some of them, granted, have 4 voters in them because there's a
Right.
lot of very rural parts of
Even in
Arizona.
Maricopa. Yeah.
But think about this for a second. Every precinct would have to be staffed by at least 7 people. You'd have to have tabulators at every single precinct, at the very minimum 2. You'd have to have printers if you're not pre-printing your ballots in every single precinct. You'd have to have all of the logistics that supply that, including the trucks, the delivery, the locations. We don't even have enough locations right now to support the vote centers that we're trying to get. You'd have to commandeer schools, which at this stage of the game don't want to house
Right. Correct.
vote centers because
That's a problem all over the country.
they,
None of the
they don't
schools
want
will.
they don't want the knuckleheads at the schools because they feel
Right.
safety for the kids. So we don't even have enough spaces. And for folks out there, Maricopa County is certainly by far the biggest in Arizona. It's the second largest voting jurisdiction in the United States of America. We surpassed Harris County under my administration, so we made it easier for folks to vote because of these innovations. I know how these systems work. I know what a crippling effect a pure implication or application of this executive order would have on our elections. And that's why I'm saying, A, I don't think it's engineered to succeed. B, I think it's engineered to undermine all of the systems that we have to the extent that at some point in the not too distant future, Donald Trump will want to say, we're declaring an emergency as to elections. We're not going to have our elections in November of 2026. Let's have them in April next year.
We watched an unprecedented assault by the Republicans on the election procedure manual. You did a phenomenal job in Arizona. Secretary of State leads the effort to put together the rule book of voting, the election procedure manual. It was something that was hard to get done for a while, and you did it. And then what we saw is, I think, 5 separate lawsuits, as I recall, challenging it. And that worried a lot of people. I heard people nationally worried about it. Like, what is the state of the election procedure manual, and is that a concern that you have for 2026?
No, I'm not concerned about it at all. The biggest success those guys had against the Elections Procedures Manual was they claimed that we violated an Administrator's Procedures Act because we didn't open it up for public commentary long enough. Well, that rule doesn't apply to this thing, and the courts said that it should, and therefore I violated it. I'm like, okay, it doesn't. So thanks, Judge. They gave me a slap on the wrist because at the end of the day, what we've got right now is we're already rewriting the one for next year. And
Great.
it's an exercise we do in the odd numbered years. Yeah, we did finally get it done. Thank you very much under my administration. But Here's the important thing. The lawsuits that were filed were insane. And the worst offenders were like the Free Enterprise Club, for example, filed a
I
lawsuit.
remember.
I'm like, why does the Free Enterprise Club meddle in elections administration? And I'll tell you, if anybody that's watching this funds the Free Enterprise Club in Arizona, you need to second guess where your money's going to, because those guys are wasting it. So stop funding those guys. Go spend your money somewhere else. But in any event, 2025, we have already sent out drafts of several of the chapters to the interested parties in the counties. They are reviewing them. We go back and we have our meetings. We do the revisions. Then we send out the next batch of chapters. Then we do this exercise month in and month out for several months. Then we send out the final draft to the counties because it's for them, right? It's the manual for elections administrators. It's written in a way that voters can understand, but it's not a voter instruction book. It's for the government administrators. Then this year, we're going to go ahead and do the full 30 days instead of the 2 weeks like we did last time, which was not against the law. Sorry, judges, you were wrong on that one. And so, that's that. So it's mostly no harm, no foul, but they can pretend like they won so they can keep fundraising on their lies.
The truth is, anyone who wants to look at those lawsuits, go to democracydocket.com. We have all of those lawsuits. They lost the overwhelming majority of them. They lost almost every claim. The election procedure manual that was written meant that there were free and fair elections in the state of Arizona. Secretary Fontes is underselling the credit he deserves for getting that manual done. And I am thrilled that there will be another one, that you feel like you'll be able to get another one done, which is like 2 for 2, like great job. And when you do, I hope you come back on and I want to talk to you about it, because it is a real credit to the people of Arizona that you have, folks like the secretary, like the governor, like the attorney general, who put this together. And it may not be for voters, but if you want a sense of how to instill voter confidence, go read that manual, and it will show you why people should be confident in the free and fair elections in Arizona. And it is a shame. It is an absolute outrageous shame that Republicans attacked that document in the way they did. And I am glad that they lost almost every one of those attacks, and that you are fearlessly going to keep moving forward. Thank you, Secretary Fontes, for being with me.
Happy to do it, Mark.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Defending Democracy. Please stay informed on the latest voting rights and democracy news by signing up for our free newsletter. We'll see you next time.